The letter didn't come in an envelope. It arrived as light, a soft, amber pulse that materialized on Maya Reyes's kitchen table at 6:47 in the morning, right next to her half-eaten toast and her cold cup of coffee. She was 34 years old, a former trauma negotiator for the Chicago PD, currently unemployed, currently behind on rent, currently wearing her dead mother's cardigan, and arguing with herself about whether oatmeal counted as a real breakfast. The light sat there, humming like it had somewhere to be. Maya stared at it. It stared back, if light could stare. She picked up her butter knife, poked it. The light split into two halves, then rejoined itself, and in the rejoining, it left behind a card. A physical card, matte black, with no writing on either side. Just a single raised symbol in the center that somehow, impossibly, she understood to mean, "You have been selected." She flipped the card over again. Still blank on the back. "Selected for what?" she said out loud to nobody. Her cat, Dennis, jumped on the table, sniffed the card, and walked away. Even he wasn't impressed. By 9 a.m., she had Googled everything she could think of. By noon, she had called her sister, her former supervisor at the department, and her therapist in that order. Her sister told her to throw it away. Her former supervisor asked if she'd been drinking. Her therapist, a calm woman named Dr. Patricia Osei, who had guided Maya through 4 years of post-trauma reconstruction, simply said, "How does it make you feel?" "Like I've been chosen for something I didn't apply for," Maya said. "Welcome to most of life," Dr. Osei replied. That night, at exactly 11:11 p.m., the card glowed again. And this time, Maya didn't reach for a butter knife. She pressed her thumb against the raised symbol, and the world folded. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a quiet fold, like a piece of paper being creased with great patience, and when the fold settled, Maya was no longer in her apartment. She was in a room made of something that wasn't quite stone, wasn't quite glass, but had the qualities of both, translucent weight, if that made sense, which it didn't but felt true. The room was circular and vast. The air tasted faintly of something between rain and copper. 12 figures stood around her in a wide ring, each of them roughly humanoid in shape but wrong in small, significant ways. Some had shoulders that sat too high. Some had eyes positioned where ears should be. One had no visible face at all, just a smooth expanse of pale skin above its jaw, and somehow it was looking at her more intently than all the others. A voice came from everywhere at once, layered and low, like a sentence being spoken by 4 mouths at slightly different speeds. Maya Reyes, former crisis negotiator. Clearance level, legacy. You have been assigned as the human representative to the Intersolar Conduct Council. Maya looked around the room. "I haven't agreed to anything," she said. Silence. The faceless one tilted its head. "You touched the symbol," the layered voice said. "I touched a card at my kitchen table," Maya said. "That's not consent. That's curiosity. Those are 2 completely different things, and I spent 10 years professionally telling the difference." More silence. But a different kind. Surprised silence. "No previous representative has challenged the designation process," the voice said, slower now, as if recalibrating. "Then your previous representatives probably had worse boundaries than me," Maya said. "So, let's start over. What exactly is the council? What do you want from a human representative? What are the terms? And what happens if I say no?" One of the 12 figures shifted its weight. Another made a sound that could have been a cough or a laugh. The faceless one was absolutely still. And the voice, for the first time, paused before speaking. Really paused, like something in a very large machine was turning over slowly, deciding. "We will explain," it finally said. "We did not expect to have to." "Get used to it," Maya said, and she pulled her mother's cardigan tighter around her shoulders and she waited. They told her about the clause over a table that wasn't there until she needed it. The table appeared when Maya looked for somewhere to sit, not conjured dramatically, just present, as though the room had been waiting for her to want it. She sat. No one offered her anything to drink, which she noted, because she had spent years noticing what people didn't offer in tense rooms. The explanation came from a member of the council who introduced itself as Solon. Solon was the one with displaced eyes, set near the temples, large and amber, with horizontal pupils like a goat. Its mouth moved when it spoke, but the words arrived in Maya's ears a half-second before its lips formed them, which created a mild, persistent dissonance she decided she would simply have to live with. 312 years ago, Solon said, Earth was formally catalogued by the Intersolar Survey Commission. Maya leaned forward. We didn't know that. You were not consulted. The survey does not consult. It observes and files. That seems like a problem. It is policy. Lots of problematic things are policy, Maya said. Go on. Solon's expression shifted in a way she couldn't read yet. When Earth was catalogued, your species was assigned a classification. Based on the survey's criteria, your technological development, your conflict index, your biological volatility, you were designated class Vathani, which means pre-stable, a civilization not yet capable of interacting with the broader interstellar community without risk of disruption. Maya absorbed this. Risk to us or risk to others? Both, Solon said, was the Council's position at the time. And that position created the clause? Yes. The Vathani Protection Clause was passed unanimously. It established a formal prohibition on direct contact with Earth. No trade. No transmission. No observation missions within the inner atmosphere. And it created the human representative position, a designated seat on the Council, meant to hold space for Earth's interests, to cast a vote on any matter that affected your planet. Maya turned this over in her mind. But the position was always held by a human? No, Solon said. That is the issue. She went still. The position was meant to be filled by a human. But the first selection, 290 years ago, was made on a night when your representative failed to respond. The card was never touched. And so the council appointed a proxy, a council member named Vares of the Drevathi people, to hold the seat temporarily. Temporarily, Maya repeated. Temporarily, Solon confirmed. Vares held the seat for 11 of your years. Then Vares' successor held it. Then theirs. For 290 years, a Drevathi proxy has been voting on matters that affect Earth. Maya was quiet for a moment. How many votes happened in those 290 years? Solon's temple eyes held steady. 47. And how many of those 47 votes were about the protection clause? A pause. 41. And every single vote, Maya said slowly, went toward maintaining the clause, keeping humans isolated, keeping humans classified as unstable, keeping humans, she paused, protected. Yes, Solon said. Maya sat back in her chair. She thought about her mother, who had died not knowing that 12 alien species were voting on her planet's future over a table somewhere between stars. She thought about every scientist who had ever pointed a telescope at the sky and found silence. She thought about the word protection and all the different weights it could carry depending on who said it and why. Who selected me? She asked. I did, Solon said. Why? Because the next vote on the clause is in 8 days. And this time, the motion is not to maintain it. Solon leaned forward slightly. This time, the motion is to make it permanent, indefinite, irrevocable. The room felt heavier. And whoever made that motion, Maya said, they'd need the human representative's seat empty or filled with a proxy they trust for it to pass. Yes. Maya looked at Solon for a long time. You went outside the system to select me. I selected you through the system. But you went looking. You found someone specific. Someone who would push back. She tilted her head. Why do you care what happens to Earth? Solon was quiet for a moment. Long enough that Maya knew the answer was personal. I have my reasons, Solon said. That's not good enough, Maya said. Not if you want me to walk into a council chamber and fight a 290-year-old political structure with 8 days of preparation. Solon looked at her. Really looked, with those amber, impossible eyes. My daughter, Solon said finally, was born on Earth. The council complex was called the Rathava, and it existed in a place that Maya's mind kept trying to describe as between places, between solar systems, between gravitational fields, between the kind of space that made sense and the kind that didn't. Solon gave her a room. It was simple and clean, with a narrow bed and a window that looked out onto something that might have been stars, or might have been something else entirely pretending to be stars. The gravity was slightly lower than Earth's standard, which meant Maya kept misjudging the force she needed to set things down. Every cup, every object, landed harder than she intended. She felt constantly like she was announcing herself. She couldn't sleep. She sat at the edge of the bed and thought about what Solon had told her, not the political architecture, which was complicated enough, but the last line. My daughter was born on Earth. She thought about all the things that sentence contained. An alien on Earth. A child. A birth. A whole life lived inside the silence that the council had enforced. Someone Solon loved, existing inside a cage the council had built and called care. In the morning, or what passed for morning in a place without sun, Solon brought her to the council's public archives and left her with a researcher named Fun. Fun was young by council standards, though Maya had no reliable way to judge anyone's age here. Fun was small, dense with nervous energy, and belonged to a species called the Kavari, which meant they had 4 arms, 2 of which were used for movement and 2 for communication, a constant, fluid sign language that ran alongside their spoken words like a second voice, adding tone and subtext. Fun's second voice was extremely expressive. When Maya was introduced, Fun's hands said something she didn't understand yet, but which felt like, finally. I've been preparing for a human representative for 6 years, Fun said. The hand said, nobody believed me that it would happen. 6 years, Maya said, since Solon started looking. Fun opened a file, not digital, not paper, something between the two, a medium that held information in its structure like what holds rings, and laid it flat on the table. These are all 47 votes. I cross-referenced every motion, every secondary argument, every abstention. And I found a pattern that no one has formally documented. Maya looked at the file. She couldn't read the language, but the structure was visible. The rhythm of data, the spacing of entries. She could read rhythm. She had spent her career reading rhythm. Tell me, she said. Fun's hands moved expressively as they spoke. The Drevathi proxy always voted to maintain the clause. But in 12 of the 47 votes, the motion to lift the clause failed by only 1 vote. 1 vote. Meaning if the human seat had been occupied by an actual human voting their own interest, the clause would have been lifted 12 times in the last 290 years. Okay, Maya said. So, the proxy was consistent. That's what proxies do. They vote their master's interest. Yes, Fun said. But here's what I found. Fun flipped the file to a section near the back. The Drevathi proxy is not Drevathi. Maya looked up. The current proxy, who has held the seat for the last 40 years, goes by the council name Assessor Vale. Vale is listed as Drevathi in the official registry. But I cross-referenced the physiological records from Vale's initial council intake, and the biometric markers do not match any known Drevathi variant. So Vale is not who they claim to be, Maya said. No. And more than that, Fun's hands went very still, which Maya was already learning meant something significant. The biometric markers I found match a species that the council officially declared extinct 140 years ago. The room was quiet. What species? Maya said. Fun hesitated. The Anvarath. The name meant nothing to Maya. But the way Fun said it with weight, with something that looked like fear, told her it should mean something. Who were the Anvarath? She asked. Fun looked at her steadily. The species that originally proposed the Vethani Protection Clause, Fun said. They were the ones who first argued that humans were too dangerous to be contacted. They were the primary architects of your isolation. Fun paused. And they were declared extinct after a war. A war that they started. A war against a planet that had tried to make first contact with them. Maya sat with this for a long moment. They started a war over first contact, she said. Yes. And now one of them is sitting in the seat that was supposed to be mine, Maya said, voting every year to make sure humanity stays exactly as isolated as possible. Yes, Finn said. Because they're afraid of contact, Maya said. Because contact for them historically means war, Finn said. To the Anverath, contact has always preceded conflict. It is not ideology. It is lived experience. Traumatic, species-wide, generational experience. Fun's hands moved again, and this time Maya read the gesture as something between sadness, and this is the part nobody talks about. The Anverath did not design the claws to oppress humanity. They designed it because they are genuinely, profoundly afraid of what happens when two civilizations meet. Maya was quiet for a long time. Outside the window, the Not Stars held their positions. They're not our villains, Maya said finally. It wasn't a question. No, Finn said. I don't think they are. Then what are they? Fun's hands made a gesture Maya didn't have a word for yet. Something between wounded and determined, and still here, against all odds. Survivors, Finn said. Just like you. Maya asked to meet Vale. Solon told her it was not done. Representatives did not meet privately before a vote. The protocols were strict, designed over centuries to prevent coercion. I'm not going to coerce anyone, Maya said. The protocol doesn't distinguish between coercion and conversation, Solon said. That's a significant flaw in the protocol. It has been noted before. By whom? By me, Solon said. Repeatedly. For 40 years. Maya looked at Solon. She was getting better at reading Solon's face. The slight tension around those amber eyes that meant frustration, the particular stillness that meant decision already made. You've been on this council for 40 years, she said. 43, Solon said. And in 43 years, with all your access, all your knowledge of what Vale is and where the claws came from, you couldn't break this open yourself. Solon was quiet. Why not? Maya pressed. Because I am Drevathi, Solon said. And the Drevathi have their own history with the Anverath. If I exposed Vale, it would look like a political attack from an old enemy. The vote would fracture along species lines. Earth would become collateral in someone else's old war. Solon met her eyes. I needed someone with no history here. Someone the council couldn't categorize. Someone who could stand up in that chamber and make it about Earth, and only Earth, and not about everything else we've been carrying for centuries. You needed someone who didn't know enough to be afraid, Maya said. I needed someone who knew exactly the right things to be afraid of, Solon corrected. And exactly the right things not to be. She met Vale, anyway. Not officially. Not through any channel that would appear in a record. She simply waited in a corridor that Finn told her Vale used to move between the chamber and the archives, and when Vale appeared, Maya stepped into their path and said, I'd like 5 minutes. Vale stopped. Up close, the Anverath looked nothing like what Maya had imagined. They were slight, smaller than her, with a quality of stillness that felt deeply practiced, the stillness of someone who had learned very young that being noticed was dangerous. Their skin was a layered gray-blue, like old water over stone. Their eyes were very dark and very careful. They looked at Maya for a long moment without speaking. You know who I am, Maya said. You are the human, Vale said. The voice was quiet, precise. A voice that chose every word. Maya, she said. And I know who you are too. I'm not here to threaten you. I'm here because in 8 days I'm going to walk into that chamber and vote against the claws, and I'd rather understand why you built it before I dismantle it. Vale's careful eyes moved over her face. You cannot understand. Try me, Maya said. I spent 10 years sitting across tables from people in crisis. People who had done terrible things because they were terrified. I never once walked away from one of those tables thinking I understood everything. But I always walked away understanding more than when I sat down. She held Vale's gaze. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. A long pause. The corridor was empty around them. We had a word, Vale said finally, in the old Anverath language. Verithsol. It means the moment before a stranger becomes a threat. The space between first sight and first harm. We believed, as a people, that every contact between two civilizations passes through that moment. And the question is never if it happens. The question is what you do in it. What did your people do in it? Maya asked gently. We attacked, Vale said.
Simply.
Without drama. Every time. Because we had been harmed before. Because we had learned early that waiting meant dying. Because our history taught us that the Varith soul was very short. A pause. And in attacking first, we became exactly what we feared. And eventually, there were not enough of us left to fear anything. Maya was quiet. She let the silence be full. You built the claws, she said, because you didn't want us to do what your people did. I built the claws, Vale said, because I have watched civilizations meet, and I have seen what it costs. And your people, you are brilliant, and you are violent, and you love so enormously, and you destroy so thoroughly, and I did not know how to introduce you to all of this without it ending in fire. So you chose isolation, Maya said. Forever. I chose time, Vale said. I keep choosing time. That's not your choice to make, Maya said. Not hard. Not angry. Just steady. You don't get to decide how much time humanity needs because your people were destroyed. I'm sorry that happened to them. I am genuinely, deeply sorry. But my planet's isolation is not a memorial to the Ambarath. And I won't let it become one. Vale looked at her. The corridor held its breath. You are not what I expected, Vale said. What did you expect? Anger, Vale said.
Demands. Certainty.
I'm certain about the vote, Maya said. I'm not certain about anything else. That's usually where I do my best work. She paused. In 8 days, I'm voting to lift the claws. You can vote against me. That's your right. But I wanted you to know that I understand why you built it. And I think you're not a villain. I think you're just someone who survived something unsurvivable and never found a way to stop. She met Vale's eyes. I've sat with enough of those people to recognize one. She turned and walked back down the corridor. Behind her, Vale stood very still for a long time. 6 days before the vote, Maya made a mistake. She stood up in a preliminary council session, a formality, a procedural meeting meant for introductions and agenda setting, and she spoke out of turn. She didn't mean to. She heard the language of the motion being presented, the careful bureaucratic framing of irrevocable designation and civilizational stability index, and something in her crisis negotiator brain clocked the code beneath it. This was not procedural language. This was closing language. This was the language of a decision being presented as already made. She stood up. That's finalization language, she said. You're not introducing a motion. You're presenting a conclusion. 12 pairs of eyes, and some of those were not pairs exactly, turned toward her. The session leader, a massive, slow-moving being called Theron whose species communicated partially through bioluminescent patterns across their hide, flickered something Maya didn't understand. Solon, seated beside her, leaned close. You were not supposed to speak until introduced. I know, Maya said quietly. But if I'd waited, they would have passed a procedural motion to fast-track the vote. A fast-track means no formal rebuttal period. They were going to remove the floor from under me before I even found my footing. Solon was quiet for a moment. You are right, Solon murmured. That is exactly what they were doing. Procedure is one of the most sophisticated weapons humans ever invented, Maya said. We use it on each other constantly. I recognize the shape of it. She remained standing. The session had paused around her. Assessor Reyes, Theron said. The title still felt strange, but she wore it. You are out of order. I understand, Maya said. And I accept the procedural penalty for that, whatever it is. But I want to flag for the record that the motion just presented uses finalization language in what was filed as an introduction motion. If the council is going to vote on the future of an inhabited planet, I think we should at least be honest about when we're doing it. The chamber was very still. Then the faceless being, the one who had watched her from the first moment, whose name she still didn't know, made a sound. A low, resonant hum that Maya somehow understood was acknowledged. The motion was reframed. The fast track was quietly dropped. After the session, 3 different council members who had not yet spoken to Maya found reasons to cross her path. None of them said anything meaningful, but they looked at her with a quality of attention that she recognized as reassessment. That evening, Finn found her at the window that looked at the night stars. "I need to tell you something," Finn said. The 4 arms were still, which Maya now understood meant Finn was nervous. "Tell me." "Solon's daughter," Finn said. "The one born on Earth." Maya waited. "Her name is Lena. She is 26 years old. She lives in Portland, Oregon. She was born to Solon and a human woman named Caroline during a period when Solon was assigned to a covert observation post, against council regulation, but not uncommon. The observation posts have existed in violation of the clause for 100 years. Most council members know about them. Nobody formally acknowledges them. Maya absorbed this. So the clause prohibits contact with humanity, but the council has been sending observers to Earth in secret. Yes. And those observers have been living among you, Finn said. Quietly. 4 generations. Are they human? Do they look? Most of the species represented here can approximate human physiology sufficiently. It requires effort. It has costs. But yes. Maya stood up from the window. She walked across the room. She came back. She was doing the thing she did when her brain needed her body to move. The clause, she said, was never really about protecting humans from contact. Because contact has been happening. Secretly. The clause was about controlling who got to make contact and on whose terms. Finn's hands moved. Yes, exactly. And Solon, Maya said slowly, who has a daughter on Earth who has never been told what her father really is. Solon wants the clause lifted not just for Earth's benefit. No, Finn said softly. Solon wants to go home, Maya said. Finn was quiet. Maya stood in the middle of the room and felt the weight of everything she was carrying. The vote in 6 days. An extinct species in a borrowed identity. A planet that didn't know it was being watched. A half-human girl in Portland who thought her father had abandoned her. 1,000 years of political machinery built on fear and maintained by silence. She thought about her mother's cardigan. She thought about cold coffee. She thought about what Dr. Osei had said, welcome to most of life, and she almost laughed, but it got stuck somewhere between her chest and her throat.
Fun, she said.
Yes. How do I win this vote? Fun's 4 arms moved in a complex, layered gesture that Maya was only beginning to learn. You don't win it, Fun said. Winning implies the other side loses. And on a council of 12 species, a loss today becomes a grievance that shapes the next vote, and the next, and the next. The hands added, I've watched it happen for 50 years. You have to change something. Not the vote. Something underneath the vote. The fear, Maya said. Yes, Finn said. Maya nodded slowly. Then I need to understand every species in that room, she said. Not their politics. Their fears. Specifically. She looked at Finn. And I need 6 days to learn them. Finn smiled. The Kavari smile was different from a human one, smaller and in the eyes more than the mouth, but Maya recognized it now, and all 4 arms moved at once. Finally, they said, someone who's asking the right questions. She didn't sleep much for the next 5 days. Fun was extraordinary. What Maya had taken for nervous energy was actually something closer to contained brilliance. Fun had spent 6 years quietly building a record that nobody had asked for, organizing knowledge for a moment that nobody except Fun and Solon had believed would arrive. Every evening, Fun spread files across the table and walked Maya through the council. Theron species, the Gulov, communicated through light patterns and had evolved on a world of perpetual cloud cover. For them, darkness was ancestral safety, and exposure, literally being seen, was the deepest threat response in their biology. The claws, for the Gulov, represented something primal, the comfort of keeping something hidden, even if the reasoning was political rather than physical. The Tresai, who had 4 representatives and spoke as a collective, had a history of absorbing other species' cultural frameworks and losing pieces of their own in the process. Their anxiety around Earth was about a different kind of contamination, not biological, but ideational. Human culture, human media, human storytelling had already leaked into interstellar space through signal. The Tresai had been receiving Earth's broadcasts for decades, and they were fascinated in a way that frightened them, because fascination had preceded their cultural erosions before. The being without a face, Maya finally learned its name was Orith, and it belonged to a species called the Senu, had no anxiety about Earth at all. Orith had been the only consistent abstention across all 47 votes. The Senu simply did not engage with the clause philosophically. They considered it a question outside their domain. Orith attended every session and said almost nothing and saw, Maya was increasingly sure, everything. She spent an entire day just sitting with the pattern of Orith's silence. In her negotiation work, silence was data. Orith's silence was not neutral. It was the silence of someone who had already reached a conclusion and was waiting for everyone else to catch up. On day 4, she asked Solon for access to the covert observation records. Solon went very still. Those are not public documents. I know. If I give you access to them, I am in violation of. You're already in violation of half a dozen council protocols, Maya said. You made extralegal contact with an undesignated human. You selected a representative outside the formal lottery. You've been sharing confidential archive material with me all week through fun. She held Solon's gaze. I need the observation records because I think they contain something that will change the chamber. Something that the council has been carefully not looking at for a very long time. Solon held her gaze for a long moment. My daughter doesn't know, Solon said, that I exist. What I am. I know, Maya said. If the records are introduced as evidence in a council session, she will. She won't have to know, Maya said. I'm not using this to expose anyone. I'm using it to make an argument. She paused. But Solon, eventually she should know. Not for the council. For her. Solon was very quiet. She would hate me, Solon said. Maybe, Maya said. For a while. She thought of her own father. Absent, and then returned, and then gone again. But hatred requires engagement. And engagement, even the painful kind, is better than the silence she's been living in. Solon closed their eyes. Open them. I will get you the records, Solon said. The records were devastating. Not because they revealed cruelty. The observers had not been cruel. Mostly they had been careful, respectful, deeply committed to their non-interference mandate. But the records showed 500 years of watching. 500 years of council members and their proxies living among humans, recording them, filing reports. Births.
Deaths. Wars.
Small kindnesses. Large catastrophes. And in every report, without exception, the conclusion was the same. Recommend continuation of the Vet-Hani Protection Clause pending further evaluation. 500 years of further evaluation. 500 years of not yet. Maya read through the night and into the morning, and somewhere around hour 14, she stopped on a report from 60 years ago. It was filed by an observer stationed in a small town in rural New Mexico. The report was factual and measured, as all the reports were. It covered a drought. It covered a community's response to the drought. It covered neighbors sharing water, sharing food, driving 40 miles to sit with an elder who is sick and alone. At the bottom of the report, in the section marked Additional Observations, the observer had written something that was not factual and not measured. It said, I find myself uncertain whether the function I am serving here is protective. The species I am observing does not appear to need protection from contact. They appear to need contact. The isolation they already live within from one another, from meaning, from the sense that they are not alone in this, seems to cause them considerable suffering. I am filing this concern for the record, though I understand it will not affect the clause review. It had not affected the clause review. Maya sat back. She knew what she was going to say in the chamber. The vote was at what the council called third meridian, which corresponded to nothing in human timekeeping but felt, in the Rathava, like early afternoon, a quality of settled, serious light. Maya wore her mother's cardigan. She had been offered council attire, a structured garment in deep gray that all new representatives wore, a visual signal of institutional belonging. She'd tried it on. It had felt like a costume. She'd put the cardigan back on, and Finn had looked at her hands and said something Maya now knew meant good. The chamber was larger than the room where she'd first arrived. Circular, tiered, with each council member at a designated place around a central platform. The platform was where representatives stood to address the full body. Maya had been told she would have 15 minutes. She intended to use 12. Theron opened the session with a long formal recitation that Solon whispered translation for. Motion before the council. Permanent irrevocable designation of Earth under the Vethani Protection Clause, with all associated restrictions maintained in perpetuity. Proposed by the current proxy for the human seat. Seconded by 2 members of the Tresai Collective. Assessor Vale sat at the human seat and did not look at Maya. The session opened for statements. Several council members spoke, formal, measured, the language of people who had said similar things many times. Then Theron called Maya's name. She walked to the central platform. The chamber was very quiet. "I want to start," Maya said, "by saying that I don't think the Vethani Protection Clause was built out of malice." This was not what anyone expected. She watched the recalibration move across the room. "I've spent the last 6 days learning why this clause exists. The fear behind it is real. The history behind it is real. Several species in this chamber carry wounds from first contacts that went wrong, catastrophically, irreversibly wrong. And the instinct to prevent that, to build a wall and call it protection, is not evil. It's survival. I know what survival looks like. I've sat across tables from people in survival mode my entire career." She paused. "But I also know what survival mode costs when it runs for too long. When it calcifies. When it stops being a response to a present danger and starts being a habit that outlives its reason." She looked around the chamber. Earth has been under this clause for 312 years. In those 312 years, 67 council observers have lived among us. Filed 5,041 reports. Watched us through droughts and wars and disasters and ordinary Tuesdays. Every single report ends with the same recommendation. Not yet.
She let that land.
I found one report, 1 out of 5,000, where an observer wrote something different. They wrote that humanity didn't seem to need protection from contact. They seemed to need contact. That the isolation they already lived within from each other, from meaning, from the knowledge that they are not alone, was causing suffering. She paused. That report was filed 60 years ago. The observer recommended the clause be reviewed. The review didn't happen. Theron shifted. Light moved across Theron's hide. "I am not standing here to argue that humanity is ready. That framing, ready, as if contact is a test you pass, I reject it entirely. No one in this chamber was ready before their first contact with another species. You were unknown to each other, and then you weren't, and you built something through that. Sometimes it was war. Sometimes it was trade. Sometimes it was just 2 species looking at each other and revising everything they thought they knew about what life could look like." She turned slightly, addressing the Tresai. "I know some of you are afraid of what human culture will do to yours. I've seen your signal intake records. You've been watching our stories for decades. And I'm asking you to consider that what worries you about our stories, the way they get inside you, the way they rearrange something, that is not a threat. That is what stories are supposed to do. That is what contact does. It rearranges things. That is not contamination. That is the point." She turned to Theron. "For the Gulliv, being seen is frightening. I understand that physiologically, historically. But you have been seeing us for 300 years without letting us see you. That is not protection. That is surveillance with a philosophical justification." Theron's hide flared with light. "I'm not saying that to attack you," Maya said steadily. "I'm saying it because it's true. And because I think you know it's true." She looked at Vale last. Vale was watching her with dark, careful eyes. "The Anvarath built this clause," Maya said quietly, "because they were afraid of what happens when worlds meet. Because for their species, every meeting eventually became a war. I am not dismissing that history. The Anvarath suffered enormously. And a remnant of that species has been sitting in this chamber for 290 years, carrying that history alone, trying to protect everyone else from it. The chamber was absolutely silent. But the Ambaratha story is not Earth's story. And I will not allow my planet's future to be written by someone else's trauma. No matter how real that trauma is. No matter how much I understand it.
She paused.
We deserve the chance to write our own. She stepped down from the platform. The vote was called. The vote required a 2/3 majority to pass the permanent, irrevocable designation. 2/3 of 12 was 8 votes. Maya had Solon. She was fairly confident about 2 of the Tresai, the ones whose signal intake records showed the deepest pattern of human cultural engagement. She had said what she needed to say to Theron and genuinely did not know which way Theron would go. Orith had abstained on every previous vote, and she had chosen not to try to move Orith. Some silences were not hers to break. The remaining 6 votes were uncertain. The council voted through a system Maya found strangely moving. Each member placed a physical object, a small piece of the material that the Rathava was built from, into one of 2 openings in the central platform. The opening on the left was continuation. The opening on the right was change. They voted one by one, in order of seniority. Solon went first.
Right.
The Tresai voted as a block, 3 left, 1 right, which surprised Maya, and she filed the surprise away for later. Theron went left. Maya had been right not to count on it. 3 more went left in quick succession, and Maya felt the math beginning to collapse. She held herself still. She was good at holding herself still. 2 more went right. Then it was Vale's turn. The human seat voted last. Vale stood, walked to the platform, stood in front of the 2 openings,
and paused.
The pause lasted long enough that Theron flickered something. Long enough that the Tresai shifted collectively. Long enough that Maya, across the chamber, felt something change in the room's atmosphere. A pressure change, like before a storm. Vale looked up, looked directly at Maya, and placed their piece in the right. The chamber erupted. Not in cheering, this was not a body that cheered. But the noise was immediate and layered, 12 species expressing surprise and recalculation simultaneously, a cacophony of biology. Theron's hide blazed. The Tresai collective fragmented briefly into individual voices before reknitting. Orith, who had abstained as predicted, made the low resonant sound Maya now recognized as acknowledgement. The final count, 7 for permanent designation. 5 against. The motion failed. The Vethani protection clause was not made permanent. In the corridor afterward, Vale found her. You didn't have the votes, Vale said. Without mine, it would have passed. I know, Maya said. You knew when you were standing at that platform. I thought there was a chance, Maya said carefully. I wasn't certain. Vale was quiet for a moment. I have been certain for 290 years, Vale said. It is exhausting. Being certain is the most exhausting thing I have ever done. A pause. You said the Ambaratha story was not Earth's story. You are correct. But it is also not a closed story. We are not entirely gone. No, Maya said. You're not. I don't know what to do with that, Vale said. With being still here. Honestly, Maya said. Neither do I most of the time. I just keep showing up anyway. She looked at Vale. The clause still exists. Today just kept it from being permanent. The council will revisit it. Yes, Vale said. And when they do, Maya said, you'll have to vote again. Yes, Vale said. A long pause. I would like, Vale said carefully, to read those observer reports. All of them. Maya looked at them. Why? Because I have been deciding for humanity for 290 years, Vale said, and I have never actually studied humanity. I have studied my fear of what humanity might become. That is not the same thing. Maya nodded slowly. No, she said. It's really not. She started to walk away. Reyes, Vale said. She turned. The woman in Portland, Vale said. Solon's daughter. Maya waited. Does she know that her mother is? Her father, Maya said gently. Solon is her father. Vale absorbed this. Does she know? Not yet, Maya said. She should, Vale said. Whatever the cost. A beat. I know something about the damage that is done when a person is not told the true shape of their own story. Maya held Vale's gaze.
I'll tell Solon you said so, she said.
She went home. The fold happened in reverse, quiet, patient, like the world being smoothed back into place. And Maya was standing in her kitchen at 4:18 in the morning, and Dennis the cat was asleep in the exact center of the couch and did not move when she came in. The card was still on the kitchen table. She picked it up. The raised symbol caught the low kitchen light. She looked at it for a moment, then set it down where it had been. It was a door she understood now, not a designation. A door she could leave through and come back through. The council seat was hers for as long as she held it. She made coffee that was too strong and stood at the window looking out at the Chicago pre-dawn, the gray buildings and the streetlights, and a bus going by on the wet street below, and she thought about the Rathava and its not stars, and she thought about Finn's forearms moving in the language that ran beneath words, and she thought about Vale standing at the platform, pausing, and then choosing the future over the past with one small movement of the hand. She thought about Lena in Portland, who didn't know. She thought about how much the world contained that people didn't know. The ordinary immensity of it. She had always known this, you couldn't do crisis work without knowing it, but she had never known it quite like this, quite with this particular texture. Her phone buzzed. Her sister, in a text sent hours ago that she hadn't seen. Did you throw away that card? Maya smiled. She texted back. Not exactly. 3 weeks later, she was on a flight to Portland. She had talked with Solon for a long time before she left, not on the Rathava, but through the card, which she had learned could function as a thin transmission point if she held it in a specific way that Finn had shown her, a small compromise in the fabric of the clause that had apparently been an open secret among council observers for decades. Solon had been quiet through most of the call, had said no several times, had said she will hate me twice, and I don't deserve once, and Maya had sat with all of those and not argued with any of them. I know, she had said each time, and you should still do it. By the end, Solon had not agreed but had not said no again either. Maya had learned over 10 years to read the difference between a no and a not yet, and this was not yet. She didn't know if Solon would come. But she knew where Lena lived, because it was in the observation records, and she knew that Lena was a ceramicist who worked out of a studio attached to her house, and that she had her mother's hands according to a report from 9 years ago, and that she had always seemed, to the observers who documented her life without her knowledge, like someone waiting for something she didn't have a name for. Maya understood that particular kind of waiting. She was not going to tell Lena everything. Not yet. That was Solon's story to tell, when and if Solon found the courage for it. But she was going to make contact. She was going to knock on a door and say her name and see what happened next. Because that's what contact meant. Not certainty. Not readiness. Not the guarantee that two things meeting would not change each other. Just the courage to stop letting the Varith soul, the moment between stranger and threat, run on its own. To step into it deliberately. To say, I see you. I don't know what comes next. But I'm here. The plane flew through ordinary clouds. Below, Portland was rain-gray and familiar. Maya pulled her mother's cardigan tighter and looked out the window and thought about all the reports ever filed on humanity, the suffering and the stubbornness, and the neighbors driving 40 miles through a drought to sit with someone who shouldn't be alone, and she thought that if someone were filing a report on her right now, at this particular moment, in this particular window seat with bad coffee and no sleep and a whole world that had just turned itself inside out, she thought the report might say, she is not ready. She is uncertain. She is afraid in the appropriate places and brave in the ones that matter. She is going anyway. Recommend contact.